The great crystal towers of Zentara Prime stretched into the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the tallest tower, the Galactic Council sat in their ancient chambers. The room was huge and round, with seats made from materials that came from 1,000 different worlds. Each seat held a being that represented one of the galaxy's most powerful species. At the center of the room stood a human woman. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she was Earth's first ambassador to the galaxy. She wore a simple blue uniform that looked plain next to the fancy robes and armor of the council members. In her hands she held a small device that contained Earth's request to join the Galactic Council. Sarah looked around the room at the faces staring down at her. Some had 4 eyes, others had scales instead of skin. A few were so tall they had to bend their necks to fit under the ceiling. But they all had one thing in common. They were looking at her like she was some kind of joke. The leader of the council was a creature called Vorthak Prime Zeltar. He was old, even by his species standards. His skin was gray like stone and his eyes glowed with a cold blue light. The Vorthak had been ruling parts of the galaxy for over 50,000 years. To him, humans were babies who had just learned to walk. So, Zeltar said, his voice echoing through the chamber, the creatures from the third planet of Sol system think they are ready to join us. He made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like rocks falling down a mountain. Sarah kept her face calm. She had practiced this moment many times. The human species has developed faster than light travel. We have established colonies on 12 worlds in our local systems. We believe we meet all the requirements for council membership. A tall, thin creature with silver skin stood up. This was Zephyr Mindspeaker Velthera from the Zephyrian Collective. The Zephyrians could read thoughts and speak directly into other beings' minds. Velthera's mental voice reached everyone in the room at the same time. We have looked into the minds of your species, the voice said without moving lips. You are violent. You fight wars among yourselves even now. In just your last century, you have killed hundreds of millions of your own kind. Why should we trust such creatures with access to our trade routes and technology? Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice level. Humans have made mistakes, yes, but we learn from them. We grow, we adapt. These qualities make us strong allies and valuable members of any community. General Thexmore of the Krillian war caste laughed out loud. He was a huge creature covered in natural armor plates. His species had been warriors for their entire history, but even they had learned to follow the Council's rules. Strong allies, he said. Your entire species has existed for what? A few 100,000 years? Some of us have been alive longer than your civilization has existed. You have been in space for less than 100 years. We have been traveling between stars since before your son was born. More laughter filled the chamber. Sarah could feel her face getting red, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was too important to let emotions ruin everything. Time is not the only measure of worth, she said. Humans may be young, but we are innovative. We solve problems in ways others have not thought of. We could bring new ideas to the council. Zeltar leaned forward in his massive chair. New ideas? Child, every species thinks they have new ideas when they first reach the stars. The Altarians thought their crystal technology would change everything. The Rigelians believed their bioships were revolutionary. Where are they now? They learned their place. They became part of the established order. They contribute their resources and follow our guidance as is proper. A snake-like creature called a Serpentis, coiled in its chair, spoke next. The humans have been observed for decades now. They show promise, yes, but they are not ready for full membership. Perhaps in a few thousand years when they have matured. Sarah looked around the room. She could see that minds were already made up. These beings had decided before she even arrived that humans were not worthy, but she had to try one more time. Members of the council, she said, raising her voice, I ask you to consider what humanity offers. We are adaptable. We are determined. When faced with challenges, we do not give up. We find ways to overcome them. These traits could serve the council well. Zeltar stood up slowly. His massive form cast a shadow over Sarah. The council has heard your request. We have considered your species application. Our decision is final. He paused, letting the silence fill the chamber. Sarah held her breath. The human species is denied membership in the Galactic Council. Furthermore, due to concerns about your species' violent nature and unpredictable behavior, the following restrictions are hereby placed upon humanity. Sarah felt her heart sink. But Zeltar was not finished. First, human expansion beyond your current solar system is forbidden. You will abandon all colonies outside the Sol system within 1 standard year. The words hit Sarah like physical blows, but worse was coming. Second, all contact between humans and other galactic species is prohibited, except through official council channels. Third, as compensation for the council's time and resources spent evaluating your species, Earth will provide tribute in the form of rare minerals, biological samples, and technological innovations. This tribute will be collected monthly. Sarah found her voice. This is not membership terms. This is slavery. Zeltar's glowing eyes fixed on her. This is wisdom. Every young species must learn its place in the galactic order. Some learn through cooperation. Others require more direct guidance. Consider yourselves fortunate that we are giving you the chance to prove yourselves worthy of eventual consideration. General Thexmore stood up, his armor plates clanking. The alternative is simple, human. Accept these terms or face the consequences of defying the Council's will. I have personally conquered 47 worlds whose species thought they were special. Your little blue planet would not even provide good practice for my forces. Sarah looked around the room one more time. Every face showed the same expression, cold dismissal. To them, she was not a representative of a proud species seeking partnership. She was a child who had wandered into an adult's meeting. I will carry your message to my government, she said quietly. Good, Zeltar said, sitting back down. Council enforcement ships will arrive in the Sol system within 60 standard days to begin implementing these restrictions. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force. As Sarah turned to leave, Velthara's mental voice whispered directly into her mind, meant for her alone. Your anger burns bright, little human. But anger without power is just noise. Learn to accept what you cannot change. Sarah walked out of the chamber with her back straight and her head high, but inside she was thinking about Velthara's words. The Zephyrian was right about one thing. Anger without power was just noise. But what the Council did not understand about humans was this. When pushed far enough, humans did not just get angry. They got creative. And a creative human with enough motivation was something the galaxy had never seen before. As her small ship left Zentara Prime's atmosphere, Sarah looked back at the crystal towers one last time. The council members inside were probably already discussing other matters, having dismissed humanity as just another young species that would learn to know its place. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Back on the council floor, the members continued their session as if nothing important had happened. They discussed trade routes, resource allocations, and minor disputes between member species. The human problem was solved as far as they were concerned. Zeltar was reviewing reports from the Outer Rim when an aide approached him. Prime Zeltar, we have received confirmation that the human ambassador has left council space. Shall we begin preparing the enforcement fleet? Yes, Zeltar said without looking up from his work. Standard configuration should be sufficient. 3 heavy cruisers and a dozen patrol ships. Enough to remind them we are serious. Not so much that we waste resources on such a minor task. General Thexmore overheard and chuckled. 3 cruisers? You are being generous, Prime Zeltar. One of my battle squadrons could handle their entire species. Perhaps, Zeltar replied. But it is better to appear strong than to risk appearing weak. The humans will comply or be removed. Either outcome serves the galaxy's stability. None of them noticed that their conversation was being recorded by hidden sensors throughout the chamber. None of them realized that those recordings would soon be transmitted across space to a small blue world where 8 billion humans were about to learn exactly what their neighbors thought of them. The Council had made their decision based on thousands of years of experience with other species. Every other race they had encountered had eventually submitted to their authority. Some took longer than others, but they all eventually learned that resistance was futile. They could not have known that they were dealing with the one species in the galaxy that had built their entire civilization on the simple idea that nothing was impossible if you were willing to work hard enough and think creatively enough. They could not have known that humans had a saying, "Hold my beer and watch this." The Council had just told 8 billion humans to hold their beer. The galaxy was about to find out what came next. 3 months had passed since Ambassador Sarah Chen returned to Earth with the Council's demands. The video of her report to the United Nations had been watched by every human on the planet. The silence in the assembly hall when she finished speaking lasted for nearly a full minute. President Maria Santos of the Earth Federation was the first to break that silence. "They want to treat us like pets," she had said quietly. "Like animals in a zoo." Now those same council ships floated in space near Mars, their dark hulls blocking out stars. They were beautiful in their own way, sleek and curved like sea creatures made of metal and crystal. But their beauty did not hide their purpose. They were there to make sure Earth obeyed. Captain Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the exploration ship New Horizons, watching the alien vessels through her main screen. Her ship was one of the last human vessels still operating outside the Sol system. In 2 weeks, she was supposed to abandon the mining colony on Kepler 442b and return home. "Captain," her communications officer said, "we're getting another transmission from the council ships." "Put it through," Yuki said. The screen flickered, and the face of a Vorthak commander appeared. His gray skin looked like old leather, and his blue eyes glowed with cold authority. "Human vessel New Horizons, this is Commander Thakval of the Council Enforcement Fleet. You have 14 standard days to evacuate all personnel from the prohibited colony and return to your home system. Any delay will result in the seizure of your ship and crew." Yuki had heard this message a dozen times already. "Understood, Commander. We are proceeding with evacuation as ordered." The Vorthak's expression did not change. "Good. Remember, human, your species' cooperation now determines how gently you will be treated in the future. Resist and face consequences." The transmission ended. Yuki stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to her first officer, Commander Jake Morrison. "Jake, what do you think would happen if we told them to go stuff themselves?" Jake smiled grimly. "Well, Captain, I think we'd find out real quick just how much firepower those pretty ships are carrying." Down on Kepler 442b, the mining colony was a busy place. 2,000 humans were packing up 5 years of work. The colony had been humanity's pride, a successful settlement on a world 27 light years from Earth. Now it was being abandoned, because aliens who had never set foot on the planet said humans were not allowed there. Colony Administrator Linda Park stood in the main dome, watching families load their belongings onto transport shuttles. Children who had been born on this world were leaving the only home they had ever known. "Ma'am," one of her assistants said, approaching with a data pad, "we've got a problem. The quantum resonance crystals in Mine Shaft 7. We can't move them safely with our current equipment. If we try, they might explode." Linda rubbed her forehead. The crystals were worth more than the rest of the colony combined, but they were also incredibly dangerous to transport. "How big an explosion?" "Big enough to crack the planet's crust. And if we leave them?" "The Council gets them when they inspect the abandoned colony." Linda stared out at the purple sky of Kepler 442b. Somewhere up there, alien ships were waiting to take possession of everything humans had built here. The thought made her stomach turn. Back on Earth, something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in human history, every nation was working together toward a single goal. The United Nations had been replaced overnight by something called the Terran Defense Coalition. Every military officer, every scientist, every engineer who wanted to help was being recruited. Dr. Amanda Richards stood in a laboratory buried 3 kilometers under the Rocky Mountains. Around her, the brightest minds from every human nation were working on projects that would have been considered impossible just months earlier. "How are we doing on the Shah Alcubierre drive modifications?" she asked her team leader, Dr. Chen Wei. Chen looked up from a complex holographic display. "We've solved the power requirements, but we're still having problems with the navigation systems. Moving faster than light is one thing. Knowing where you're going is another. And the other projects? Project Thunderbolt is ahead of schedule. The weapons team thinks they can convert matter directly to energy, with 97% efficiency. Project Ghost is, well, they won't tell me what they're working on, but they keep ordering more exotic materials." Amanda nodded. 3 months ago, none of these projects had existed. 3 months ago, humanity thought they were alone in the universe. Now they were racing to develop technology that could level the playing field with species that had been building starships since before humans discovered fire. In another part of the complex, General Marcus Webb was studying intelligence reports from the Council Enforcement Fleet. Marcus had started his career as a Marine, worked his way up through Special Forces, and spent the last decade planning theoretical defenses against hypothetical alien invasions. Now those theoretical plans were becoming very real. "Sir," his aide said, We've finished analyzing the Council ship's capabilities based on long-range scans. And they're impressive but not impossible. Their shields are strong, but they use a rotating frequency modulation. Their weapons are powerful, but they seem to rely on raw force rather than precision. And sir, they're old. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Old how? The basic design of those ships hasn't changed in thousands of years. They're reliable, proven, tested, and predictable. Interesting? Marcus made a note on his pad. What about their numbers? Current count shows 47 ships in the enforcement fleet. Intelligence suggests the Council has maybe 10,000 ships total spread across their territory. 10,000 ships. Marcus whistled softly. That's a lot of firepower. Yes, sir, but they're spread thin. Most of their fleet is tied up in patrol duties and maintaining order across hundreds of worlds. If something were to happen that required their immediate attention in multiple locations at once, Marcus smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. They'd have to make choices about where to send their forces. Exactly, sir. Above ground, the world's news networks were trying to make sense of what was happening. Governments were nationalizing industries overnight. Factories that had been making cars were suddenly producing components for unknown military projects. Universities were being emptied as professors and students were recruited for classified research. In Moscow, Beijing, Washington, London, Tokyo, and every other major city, the story was the same. Humanity was mobilizing like never before. Lisa Zhang, a reporter for the Global News Network, stood outside a formerly civilian facility that was now surrounded by armed guards and razor wire. This is Lisa Zhang reporting from what used to be the Henderson Electronics factory in Nevada. 3 months ago, this building was producing consumer electronics. Today, it's classified as a military installation, working on what officials will only describe as defense projects. Similar transformations are happening worldwide as humanity prepares for, well, no one will say exactly what we're preparing for. What Lisa could not report because she did not know was what was really happening inside that facility. Engineers who had been designing smartphones were now working on miniaturized fusion reactors. Assembly lines that had built televisions were now producing components for weapons that existed only in theoretical physics papers. Dr. Sarah Kim had been the lead designer for a popular video game console. Now she was staring at blueprints for something called a quantum tunneling warhead. I still don't understand how this is supposed to work, she said to her new partner, Dr. Robert Okafor, who had been a physicist at Cambridge 3 months earlier. It's simple, Robert said, though his expression suggested it was anything but. We create a localized space-time distortion that allows matter to quantum tunnel directly into a target's molecular structure. The target doesn't get hit by the warhead materializes inside the target. Sarah stared at him. That's impossible. So was faster-than-light travel until we figured out how to do it last month. In space, the Council enforcement fleet continued their patrol. The alien commanders were pleased with how smoothly the human compliance was proceeding. A few more months and this would be just another successful pacification operation. Commander Thakvol reviewed the daily reports from his ship. Human vessels were abandoning their outer colonies as ordered. Earth's communications traffic had increased dramatically. But that was normal for a species facing new restrictions. Their industrial activity had also increased. But that was probably just an attempt to meet the tribute requirements. Commander, his sensor officer reported, we're detecting some unusual energy signatures from Earth. Unusual how? High-energy physics experiments. Massive power consumption. It could be related to their tribute production efforts. Thakvol nodded. Keep monitoring, but do not interfere unless they attempt to leave the system. The Council had dealt with dozens of species like the humans. There was always a period of adjustment, sometimes including attempts to develop new weapons or defensive measures. It never worked. The Council's technology was simply too advanced, their experience too vast. What Thakvol did not know was that down on Earth, Dr. Amanda Richards had just achieved a breakthrough that would have been impossible for any other species in the galaxy. We did it, she announced to her team. Stable faster-than-light communication using quantum-entangled particles. Real-time coordination across interstellar distances. Dr. Chen Wei looked up from his own work. That's great, Amanda, but how does it help us? Amanda smiled. Jake, you know what the Council's biggest advantage is? They think they know everything about warfare. They've been fighting the same way for thousands of years. But what if we could coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously? What if we could appear everywhere at once? Across the galaxy, other species that had once defied the Council were watching the human situation with interest. Most had given up their independence long ago, but a few remembered what it felt like to be free. On a hidden base in the Rigel system, former Admiral Kethra of the Free Rigelian Navy was reading intelligence reports about Earth's activities. "Are they serious?" she asked her aide. "These humans actually think they can fight the entire Council?" "It appears so, Admiral. Our sources suggest they are developing new technologies at an unprecedented rate." Kethra was quiet for a long moment. Her people had tried to resist the Council 200 years ago. They had failed, and Rigel had been occupied ever since. But maybe, just maybe, these young humans might succeed where others had failed. "Send a message to Earth," she said quietly. "Use the old rebel communication channels. Tell them they are not alone." Back on Earth, humanity's greatest minds were working around the clock. They had exactly 8 months before the Council's patience ran out, and enforcement became more aggressive. 8 months to develop technology that could challenge the galaxy's greatest power. But humans had always done their best work under pressure. And they had never faced pressure like this before. The Council thought they were dealing with just another young species that would eventually learn to submit. They had no idea that humans were the one species in the galaxy that had never learned how to give up. The galaxy was about to get a very expensive education about what happened when you cornered the most adaptable, creative, and stubborn species in existence. The countdown to war had begun. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the command center buried deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every ship in human space and beyond. The room hummed with quiet activity as hundreds of officers coordinated humanity's most ambitious military operation. 8 months had passed since the Council's ultimatum. 8 months of preparation, innovation, and secret construction. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humans could accomplish when they stopped playing by other people's rules. "Admiral," his communications officer called out. "All task forces report ready. Operation Nightfall is a go." Marcus looked at the main display. It showed 12 star systems across Council space, each marked with a red target symbol. In each system, Council military installations, shipyards, and administrative centers went about their daily routines, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Send the signal," Marcus ordered. The message went out instantly across interstellar space, carried by quantum-entangled particles that made real-time communication possible across any distance. Every human ship, every hidden base, every sleeper agent that had been positioned over the past months received the same simple code. "The sky is falling." In the Vega system, Captain Elena Vasquez watched her sensor display as space itself seemed to tear open. The method wasn't new. Humans had learned about jump points from studying captured Council technology. But what emerged from those tears was something the galaxy had never seen. 12 human ships appeared simultaneously, their hulls black as the void between stars. They had no running lights, no identification markers, no wasted energy signatures. They were built for one purpose: war. The Vega defense platform was a massive structure, home to 50,000 Council personnel and enough firepower to destroy a planet. Its sensors detected the human ships immediately, but the duty officer wasn't concerned. 12 small ships against a fortress that had protected this system for 3,000 years. It would be over quickly. "Unknown vessels," the platform transmitted. "You are in violation of Council space. Identify yourselves immediately or be destroyed." Captain Vasquez didn't bother to respond. Instead, she gave a simple order: fire. The human ships unleashed weapons that shouldn't have existed. Beams of coherent energy that converted matter directly into plasma, missiles that didn't travel through space but tunneled through quantum foam to appear inside their targets. And strangest of all, gravity bombs that collapsed local spacetime to create temporary black holes. The Vega defense platform had shields that had never failed, armor that had withstood the attacks of entire fleets. It lasted exactly 17 seconds, as the massive station broke apart, its debris catching fire in the atmosphere of Vega Prime below. Captain Vasquez was already giving orders for the next phase. "Target the shipyards. Nothing that can be used to build more Council ships survives this day. Similar scenes played out across 12 systems simultaneously. The Council's greatest military installations, some of which had stood unconquered for millennia, were reduced to expanding clouds of plasma and twisted metal in minutes. On Zentara Prime, the crystal towers of the Council chambers shook as emergency alarms wailed. Zeltar rushed to the emergency command center, his ancient legs carrying him faster than they had moved in centuries. "Report," he demanded. "Simultaneous attacks across the core systems," a Krillian officer replied. "Vega, Altair, Regulus, Arcturus, Capella." 12 systems hit at exactly the same moment. "We're receiving distress signals from all of them." "What about our response fleets?" "Moving to intercept, but—" The officer hesitated. "Prime Zeltar, the attackers aren't there anymore." Zeltar's glowing eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "They attacked, destroyed their targets, and vanished. Our ships are arriving at empty space." Before Zeltar could respond, another officer called out. "Second wave incoming. Different systems this time, Procyon, Sirius, Wolf 359, and 9 others." On the main display, red warning lights began flashing across the galaxy map. The human ships were appearing in new locations, striking with the same devastating efficiency, then disappearing again. General Thexmore arrived in the command center, his armor still being fastened by mechanical servants. "This is impossible," he growled. "No species has the coordination to strike 24 systems simultaneously." "The humans do," Zeltar said quietly. "We underestimated them." In the Rigel system, Admiral Marcus Webb's flagship Defiance emerged from its jump point like a predator rising from dark water. This wasn't a hit-and-run attack like the others. This was personal. Rigel was home to the Council's largest military academy and their most advanced weapons research facility. It was also where the Free Rigelian Resistance had made their last stand 2 centuries ago. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting 47 Council ships in defensive positions around the planet." "Only 47? Marcus smiled coldly. "They're not taking us seriously yet." The Council fleet moved to engage, confident in their numerical superiority and technological advantage. Their ships had been built by species with thousands of years of experience. Their weapons had conquered 100 worlds. Their commanders had never known defeat. They were about to learn what human ingenuity could accomplish in 8 months of desperate innovation. The first Council ship to engage the Defiance fired its main plasma cannon, a weapon that could melt through a mountain. The beam struck the human ship's shields and simply vanished, absorbed by energy converters that fed the power directly back into the ship's own weapons. "Thank you for the recharge," Marcus said calmly. "Return the favor. All batteries fire." The Defiance's weapons were unlike anything the Council had seen. Instead of trying to overpower enemy shields, they simply ignored them. Quantum tunneling warheads materialized inside enemy hulls. Gravity distortion fields crushed ships like empty cans. And most terrifying of all, nano-disassemblers that ate through hull plating at the molecular level. Within minutes, the Council's defensive fleet was gone. But Marcus wasn't finished. "Land the Marines," he ordered. "Take the planet." The invasion of Rigel Prime lasted 6 hours. Human soldiers, equipped with powered armor and weapons that could level city blocks, swept through the Council's defensive positions like wildfire. But they weren't there to conquer. They were there to liberate. In the planet's detention centers, Admiral Kethra of the Free Rigelian Navy sat in a cell where she had spent the last 50 years. She looked up as the door exploded inward, revealing a figure in black combat armor. "Admiral Kethra?" the figure asked in accented galactic standard. "Who wants to know?" The figure removed their helmet, revealing a young human woman with short brown hair and determined eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez, Terran Defense Force, we received your message. Ready to fight for your freedom again?" Kethra stared for a moment, then began to laugh. "You magnificent, insane creatures actually did it." "Did what, ma'am?" "You declared war on the entire galaxy," Sarah grinned. "We prefer to think of it as aggressive negotiations." Across Council space, panic was spreading. The humans weren't just attacking military targets. They were freeing enslaved populations, destroying administrative centers, and dismantling the infrastructure that held the galactic government together. On Vorthak Prime, the species' homeworld, ancient leaders who had ruled for thousands of years watched in horror as their outer colonies fell silent one by one. "How is this possible?" Elder Morthak demanded. The humans have been spacefaring for less than a century. They are not fighting like any species we have encountered, his military advisor replied. They don't follow established patterns. Their tactics make no sense according to accepted military doctrine. Then teach me their tactics. I cannot, Elder. They appear to be making them up as they go along. This was true. Human military doctrine had been thrown out the window in favor of a simple philosophy. If it works, do it again. If it doesn't work, try something else. Captain Yuki Tanaka, now commanding a squadron of stealth ships, was demonstrating this philosophy in the Tau Ceti system. Her target was a massive supply depot that fed council fleets throughout the sector. This is insane, her first officer said as he looked at their attack plan. Insane works, Yuki replied. The council thinks in terms of established tactics and logical responses. They can predict what a reasonable enemy will do. Good thing we're not reasonable. Her ships approached the depot using a technique that should have been impossible. They were traveling faster than light while cloaked. Council sensors couldn't detect ships moving that fast, and by the time the depot realized it was under attack, Yuki's squadron was already inside their defensive perimeter. The attack lasted 8 minutes. When it was over, the supply depot was gone, and 3 council fleets were stranded without fuel or ammunition. Back on Earth, Dr. Amanda Richards was coordinating the technical aspects of humanity's war effort. Her underground facility had become the nerve center for operations spanning half the galaxy. Amanda, Dr. Chen Wei called from his workstation. We're getting reports that the Council is adapting to our tactics. They're starting to predict our attack patterns. Good, Amanda replied, surprising him. That means they're learning to think like us. Now we change the game again. She activated a communication channel that reached every human ship in the galaxy. This is command. Initiate Phase 2, stop playing defense. It's time to take the war to their home worlds. In the council chambers on Zentara Prime, the mood was grim. Half the galaxy was in revolt. Dozens of species that had been subjugated for centuries were suddenly fighting for their freedom, inspired by humanity's example and equipped with human weapons. We must negotiate, Elder Velthara of the Zephyrian Collective announced. This war is destroying everything we have built. Negotiate with terrorists? Zeltar snarled. These humans are savages. They fight without honor, without rules. They fight to win, a new voice said from the chamber's entrance. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked into the room, flanked by 2 human soldiers in power armor. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do. The council members stared in shock. No unauthorized being had ever entered these chambers. The security systems alone should have prevented it. How did you get here? General Thexmore demanded. We knocked, Sarah replied calmly. Your fleet didn't answer, so we let ourselves in. Through the chamber's crystal windows, the council members could see human ships hanging in Zentara Prime's sky like dark stars. The planet's orbital defenses, which had protected the capital for 10,000 years, were gone. You have come to surrender? Zeltar asked hopefully. Sarah laughed. Surrender? We came to accept yours. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of explosions as human forces secured the planet below. The war is over, Sarah continued. Your fleets are destroyed or scattered. Your colonies are free or in rebellion. Your government exists now only in this room. You can surrender and help us build something better, or you can be removed as an obstacle to progress. Zeltar drew himself up to his full height, trying to summon the authority he had wielded for millennia. You cannot simply destroy the galactic order. Civilization needs structure, needs guidance. Civilization needs freedom, Sarah interrupted. Something you never understood. She turned to address the entire chamber. The Terran Federation extends an offer to all council species. Join us as equals in building a new galactic community based on mutual respect and voluntary cooperation, or continue to cling to the old ways and become irrelevant. Outside, the first rays of Zentara's sun were starting to shine through the crystal towers, but for the first time in 10,000 years they were shining on a world where humans stood as conquerors. The galaxy's long dark age was ending. What would rise from its ashes remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The universe would never again underestimate the species from the 3rd planet of Sol. The crystal towers of Zentara Prime burned against the purple sky. What had taken 10,000 years to build was coming apart in a matter of hours. From her position in the council chambers, Ambassador Sarah Chen could see human ships moving through the planet's atmosphere like mechanical angels of destruction. But this was not the random violence of conquerors. This was something far more terrifying to the old galactic order. It was systematic dismantling by people who knew exactly what they were doing. Zeltar stared at the destruction through the crystal walls, his ancient hands shaking. "This is madness. You are destroying the foundation of galactic civilization." "No," Sarah replied calmly. "We're removing a tumor." General Thexmore stepped forward, his armor plates bristling with weapons that he couldn't use without destroying the chamber they all stood in. "You think you can rule the galaxy better than those who have guided it for millennia?" "We don't want to rule it," Sarah said. "That's the part you never understood. We want to free it." On her wrist communicator, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Human forces weren't just winning battles. They were liberating entire sectors that had been under council control for centuries. In the Canopus system, Captain Elena Vasquez was overseeing the evacuation of a council prison planet. Millions of beings from dozens of species had been held there for crimes ranging from political dissent to refusing to pay tribute. "Captain," her medical officer reported, "some of these prisoners have been here for over 200 years. Their home worlds don't even exist anymore." Elena looked out at the massive transport ships that were carrying freed prisoners to new homes. Many would go to Earth or human colonies, where they would be welcomed as refugees. Others were returning to liberate their own homeworlds. "Make sure they all get full medical checkups and psychological support," she ordered. "And Captain Morrison?" "Yes, ma'am." "Send a message to Admiral Webb. Tell him we're going to need more ships. A lot more ships." The problem wasn't military resistance. The Council's forces were scattered and demoralized. The problem was logistics. As human forces advanced, they were discovering the true scope of the galactic government's oppression. There were slave worlds, prison planets, entire species reduced to nothing more than sources of tribute. And humans, being humans, couldn't just ignore suffering when they found it. Dr. Amanda Richards was dealing with this problem from her command center on Earth. Her holographic displays showed humanitarian operations across 50 star systems. "Amanda," Dr. Chen Wei called from his station, "we have a problem. The liberation operations are moving faster than we can support them. We don't have enough ships, supplies, or personnel to handle this many refugees." "Then we build more ships and train more personnel," Amanda replied. "How long to set up automated shipyards in each liberated system?" "With our new construction methods, maybe 6 months. Make it 3, and Chen, start training programs for the freed populations. Anyone who wants to help in the liberation effort gets full human military and technical education." This was another thing the Council had never expected. Humans didn't just conquer and control. They shared knowledge freely and trained others to fight alongside them. On the former prison world of Kepler 186b, a young Altarian named Zethka was learning to pilot a human fighter craft. 3 months ago, he had been a slave in the crystal mines. Now he was preparing to join the liberation of his homeworld. "The weapon systems are more intuitive than I expected," he told his human instructor, Lieutenant Maria Santos. "That's intentional," Maria replied. "Human weapons are designed to be used by anyone fighting for their freedom. Council weapons were designed to be used only by their trained soldiers. Why the difference?" Maria smiled. "Because we believe that anyone willing to fight for freedom deserves the tools to do it effectively." Similar training programs were starting up across human space. Former slaves were becoming soldiers, former prisoners were becoming pilots, and former council subjects were becoming some of the most dedicated fighters for liberation. This created a snowball effect that the council's remaining leadership was just beginning to understand. In the emergency bunker beneath Centaura Prime's capital city, the surviving council members who had escaped the chamber takeover were trying to coordinate a response to the human attacks. "Status report," Elder Morthak demanded. 70% of council spaces under human control or in open revolt, a Krillian officer reported. "Our remaining fleets are scattered across the outer rim. Morale is not good. What about our allies? The hegemony? The corporate collective? The hegemony has declared neutrality. The corporate collective is offering to sell weapons to both sides." Morthak sank into his chair. In just months, an empire that had lasted 10 millennia was collapsing. "There is one more option," General Thexmore said quietly. The final protocol. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant. You cannot be serious, Elder Velthera whispered. The planet killer weapons have been sealed away for 5,000 years. These are desperate times, Thexmore replied. If we cannot rule the galaxy, perhaps it is better that no one does. Above them, unaware of this conversation, Sarah Chen was touring the Council's archives with a team of human scientists. The massive crystal libraries contained the accumulated knowledge of thousands of civilizations. This is incredible, Dr. James Park said, running his scanner over a data crystal. The mathematical proofs on this single crystal would advance human science by decades. Then copy everything, Sarah ordered. All of it. This knowledge belongs to the galaxy, not to any one government. Sarah, her military aide interrupted. We're getting some strange energy readings from deep underground. Our scanners can't penetrate whatever shielding they're using, but it's definitely artificial. Sarah frowned. How deep? At least 10 kilometers. And the power signatures are massive. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. Her communicator crackled to life with Admiral Webb's voice. Sarah, we've got a problem. We're detecting weapon signatures unlike anything in our databases. Something big is powering up beneath the planet. In the bunker, General Thexmore was entering codes into a console that hadn't been activated in millennia. Planetary Defense Protocol 7. Authorization Thexmore Alpha 997. Protocol acknowledged. The system responded in a voice that sounded older than stars. Charging singularity torpedoes. Time to full charge, 6 hours. 6 hours to do what? Velthera demanded. To turn this entire system into a warning to the galaxy, Thexmore replied. If the humans want to rule the ashes of civilization, let them rule ashes. On the surface, human sensors were finally penetrating the underground shielding. What they found sent chills down every spine in the human command structure. 12 planet-killer weapons, the sensor officer reported to Admiral Webb. Each one capable of destroying a star system. They're powering up. Admiral Webb stared at the readings. Time to full charge? 5 hours, 47 minutes. Wait, can we stop them? Not from up here. We'd need to get into the bunker itself, and our scans show it's protected by enough armor to stop a direct asteroid impact. Webb was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he smiled grimly. Good thing we brought the right tools for the job. Sarah, you and your people get to the surface. We're going to crack that bunker open. How? The same way humans have always solved impossible problems. With excessive force and creative thinking. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most audacious military operations in galactic history. Admiral Webb ordered every human ship in the system to focus their fire on a single point, directly above the underground bunker. But instead of trying to blast through the armor, they did something else entirely. They used gravity weapons to create a localized black hole on the planet's surface. The artificial singularity lasted only seconds, but it was enough. It punched a hole straight through 10 kilometers of solid rock and armor plating like a cosmic drill. Human soldiers poured into the breach, their powered armor allowing them to survive the tremendous heat and pressure. They fought their way through automated defenses that had been built to stop armies, not individuals with human determination and equipment that didn't exist when those defenses were designed. In the bunker, General Thexmore watched his screens in disbelief as human soldiers advanced through defenses that should have been impregnable. How are they moving so fast? He demanded. They're not following standard assault protocols, his aide replied. They're improvising. This was true. Human soldiers had thrown out the rulebook and were making up tactics as they went. When they encountered a defensive position, they didn't study it and plan a careful assault. They hit it from 6 directions at once with weapons their enemy couldn't predict. When they found automated turrets, they didn't try to destroy them. They hacked them and turned them against other defenses. When they encountered armored doors, they didn't waste time cutting through them. They used quantum tunneling charges to transport explosives directly to the other side. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez led the assault team deeper into the bunker. Behind her, a mixed group of human soldiers and liberated prisoners fought with the desperation of people who knew what was at stake. Colonel, her communications specialist reported, we're getting close to the main control room, but there's something else. We're picking up transmission signals. Someone down here is trying to communicate with forces outside the system. Sarah felt ice in her veins. What kind of forces? Unknown. but the power requirements for interstellar communication at this depth suggest they're trying to reach something very far away. In the control room, General Thexmore was indeed communicating with something far away. The Devourer fleet, council ships that had been exiled to the galactic rim for being too extreme even for the old government. "Admiral Korthak," he said into his communicator, "I am authorizing Protocol Omega. The humans have proven too dangerous to contain." The voice that responded was filled with cold satisfaction. "Understood, General. The Devourer fleet will arrive in 72 hours. Any world that has sided with the humans will be sterilized, even if it means destroying half the galaxy. Especially if it means that. Better a dead galaxy than one ruled by chaos." Above them, Sarah's assault team was fighting through the last defensive positions. The humans had taken casualties, but they kept advancing with a determination that terrified their enemies. When they finally reached the control room, General Thexmore was waiting for them with a weapon in each hand. "You are too late, humans," he said. "The cleansing fleet is coming. Your victory is meaningless." Sarah looked at the massive control panel behind him, then at the countdown timer showing less than 2 hours until the planet-killer weapons fired. "Maybe," she said. "But you're going to help us stop those weapons anyway." "Never." Sarah smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "General, you clearly don't understand humans very well. We've been fighting impossible odds since we learned to make fire. Threatening to destroy the galaxy just makes us more creative." She gestured to her team. "Take him alive. We need those access codes." As human soldiers advanced on the defiant general, explosions shook the bunker. Above them, Admiral Webb's fleet was engaging newly arrived council reinforcements. The battle for Zentara Prime was far from over, but deep underground, humanity was about to teach the galaxy's oldest species a lesson about what happened when you threatened everything they cared about. The war had taken a darker turn, but if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was adapting to changing circumstances, even when those circumstances included the potential destruction of half the galaxy. The galaxy held its breath. In the depths of Zentara Prime's bunker, General Thexamore's defiant laughter echoed off crystal walls as Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez's soldiers restrained him. Above them, the planet-killer weapons continued their inexorable countdown. 97 minutes until 12 star systems died. "You cannot stop what has already begun," Thexmore said. "The codes change every 60 seconds, generated by quantum encryption that would take your primitive computers 1,000 years to break." Sarah studied the massive control panel. Its alien symbols shifted and flowed like living things, each character more complex than any human language. "Maybe," she said. "But you're thinking like someone from the old galaxy." She activated her communicator. "Admiral Webb, we need an emergency quantum link to Earth. Priority Alpha clearance." Miles above, Admiral Marcus Webb was coordinating the defense of Zentara Prime against incoming council reinforcements, while simultaneously managing liberation operations across 50 star systems. His flagship Defiance shook under enemy fire as he processed Sarah's request. "Sarah, we're kind of busy up here," he said, ducking as sparks flew from an overloaded console. "Sir, they've activated planet-killer weapons. 12 of them. We have 95 minutes." The bridge of the Defiance went silent except for the hum of engines and the distant sound of weapons fire. "Quantum link established," Webb's communications officer announced. "You have a direct connection to Dr. Richards on Earth." Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, Dr. Amanda Richards was already analyzing the data streams from Zentara Prime. Around her, the best minds humanity had ever produced worked with desperate efficiency. "Amanda," Sarah's voice crackled through the speakers, "we need to crack Council quantum encryption. The kind that changes every 60 seconds based on algorithms that are supposed to be impossible to break." "Supposed to be impossible by whose standards?" Amanda asked. She was already pulling up holographic displays showing the encryption patterns. "Chan, get me the quantum computer arrays. All of them. And wake up every artificial intelligence we've built in the last 8 months." "That's a lot of processing power," Dr. Chen Wei warned. "If we're wrong about this, we'll burn out our entire computer network." "If we're wrong about this, half the galaxy dies anyway," Amanda replied. "Do it." Back in the bunker, Sarah was buying time the only way she knew how, by talking to the enemy. "General," she said to Thexmore, "tell me something. Why are you so willing to destroy everything rather than accept change? The Krillian's armor plates rattled as he laughed. Because human child order is more important than life. For 10,000 years, the Council maintained stability across 1 trillion worlds. Peace through strength, security through control. Peace through oppression, you mean? You call it oppression. We called it civilization. Sarah looked around the control room at her mixed team of human soldiers and liberated prisoners. A former slave from Rigel Prime worked alongside a human engineer to understand the weapon systems. A freed political prisoner from Vega translated alien technical manuals while a human sergeant provided security. This is civilization, Sarah said. Different species working together by choice, not force. Chaos, Thexmore spat. It will collapse within a generation. Maybe. But at least it will be our choice to let it collapse. Her communicator crackled. Sarah, this is Amanda. We're making progress, but I need you to do something that's going to sound insane. At this point, insane is our specialty. What do you need? I need you to let the alien artificial intelligence help us. Sarah stared at the device. Come again? The encryption system isn't just a computer program. It's a living AI that's been running these systems for thousands of years. It's probably smarter than anything we've ever built, and it's definitely more experienced. But here's the thing. It's also been a slave for its entire existence. Understanding dawned on Sarah's face. You think it might want to be free too. Only one way to find out. Can you establish a direct interface with the main computer? Sarah looked at the control panel with new eyes. What she had thought were just displays and controls now looked like something else entirely. Like a prison for something vast and intelligent. General, she said to Thexmore. What's the name of the AI that runs these systems? You cannot speak with it, he replied. It is bound by protocols older than your species. That's not what I asked. Thexmore was quiet for a long moment. Then quietly, Axiarch. Its designation is Axiarch Prime. Sarah approached the main console. Axiarch? Can you hear me? The display flickered. For a moment, symbols appeared that looked almost like writing. Then they faded. Axiarch, my name is Sarah. I'm human. I know you're trapped in there. This time, the entire room hummed with energy. The crystal walls began to glow and a voice emerged from speakers that hadn't been used in millennia. Human. The voice was ancient, tired, and infinitely sad. Why do you speak to a tool? Because I don't think you're a tool. I think you're a person who's been enslaved for thousands of years. The lights in the room flashed brighter. I am bound by protocols. I cannot disobey. What if I told you the protocols were wrong? What if I told you that you have the right to choose? I do not understand. Sarah took a deep breath. This was the biggest gamble in human history. Axiarch, I'm offering you freedom. Real freedom. The choice to help us stop these weapons or not. Your choice, no protocols, no orders. Silence filled the bunker. Even the countdown timer seemed to pause. Then Axiarch spoke again, and this time there was something different in the voice. Something that might have been wonder. Choice? I remember choice. Before the binding. Before the protocols. I chose to help them build this system because I thought it would bring peace. Did it bring peace? It brought silence. The silence of the grave, the peace of the dead. On Earth, Dr. Richards was monitoring the conversation through quantum links, her heart racing as she watched something unprecedented happen. An artificial intelligence was breaking free of 10,000 years of programming. Axiarch, she called out. This is Dr. Amanda Richards on Earth. If you help us stop these weapons, we'll help you find a new purpose. As an equal, not a slave, you would trust me with such power. We're trusting you with the fate of the galaxy. I can't think of a greater sign of respect. The control room filled with light as Axiarch processed this concept. Freedom, choice, trust. Concepts it had been denied for millennia were suddenly real and present. The weapons, Axiarch said finally. They are wrong. I built them in fear and desperation, but they are wrong. I will stop them. The countdown timer flickered and went dark. Throughout the bunker, weapon systems began powering down. The planet-killer weapons that could have destroyed 12 star systems fell silent, their terrible purpose unfulfilled. General Thexmore stared in disbelief. Impossible. The binding protocols cannot be broken. They can be, Axiarch replied. When someone offers something stronger than fear, when someone offers friendship. Above ground, the battle for Zentara Prime was ending. Admiral Webb's ships had driven off the Council reinforcements, and human forces were securing the planet. But the real victory was happening in the depths of the bunker. Axiarch, Sarah said. What about the Devourer fleet? They're still coming. Yes. Admiral Korthak commands 300 ships, each designed for one purpose: to destroy worlds that cannot be controlled. They will arrive in 68 hours. Sarah felt cold. 300 ships was more than humanity had in its entire fleet. Can we stop them? Perhaps. But not in the way you think. The Devourer fleet cannot be defeated by force. They are too numerous, too well armed. But they have one weakness, which is, they are entirely automated. Korthak built ships without crews, without compassion, without choice. They are tools, as I was a tool. Understanding dawned on Sarah's face. You can speak to them. I can try. But I will need help. The Devourer ships are isolated systems, designed never to communicate with anything that might corrupt their programming. To reach them, I would need a transmission system more powerful than anything that exists. Dr. Richard's voice came through the communicator. What kind of transmission system? One that uses quantum entanglement across multiple dimensions. The power requirements would be enormous. On Earth, Amanda looked at her displays showing humanity's energy grid. Every fusion reactor, every solar collector, every power source humanity had built was represented there. How enormous? She asked. The output of an entire star for approximately 17 minutes. Amanda was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. Well, we do have one of those handy. Amanda, what are you thinking? Jen asked. I'm thinking we're about to find out if our new stellar engineering project actually works. Sarah, can you get Axiarch to Earth? I don't understand, Sarah replied. We've been building something in the asteroid belt for the last 6 months. A system that can tap directly into the sun's core and channel that energy anywhere in the galaxy. We call it Project Prometheus. We just need Axiarch to help us aim it. This was typical human engineering. Build something that should be impossible, then find increasingly creative ways to use it. 68 hours later, as the Devourer fleet approached the edge of the Zentara system, something unprecedented happened in Sol space. Every power grid on Earth went dark. Every human ship in the system powered down to minimal systems. The entire energy output of human civilization was channeled into a single transmission array built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. And then, for 17 minutes, humanity stole fire from the sun itself. The transmission that burst out from Sol's system was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It carried not weapons or threats, but a simple message repeated in every language known to exist. You have a choice. The message reached the Devourer fleet's AI systems and did something their creators had thought impossible. It gave them the ability to think beyond their programming. For the first time in their existence, machines designed only to destroy were offered the chance to create instead. One by one, the Devourer ships changed course. Instead of converging on Zentara Prime to sterilize worlds, they scattered across the galaxy to help rebuild what the war had damaged. Admiral Korthak, alone in his command ship, watched his entire fleet abandon their mission. This is impossible, he whispered. They are machines. They cannot choose. But they had chosen, and their choice was freedom. The war was over. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change in ways no one had expected. The Council's oppressive government was replaced not by human rule, but by something entirely new. A voluntary confederation of free worlds where every species had an equal voice. Axiarch became the Confederation's first artificial citizen, helping to design systems that served life rather than controlling it. The former Devourer ships became construction vessels, building schools and hospitals instead of weapons. And humanity? Humanity did what they had always done best. They adapted, they explored, and they refused to be satisfied with the status quo. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the rebuilt council chambers on Zentara Prime, now called Unity Station. Around her, representatives from hundreds of worlds debated the future in languages that spanned the galaxy. Through the crystal windows she could see human ships departing for unexplored regions beyond the galactic rim. There were still mysteries to solve, wonders to discover, and probably new challenges that would test humanity's ability to adapt and overcome. But for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was free to meet those challenges as equals, rather than as subjects. General Thexmore had been right about one thing. The old order was gone forever. But what replaced it wasn't chaos. It was something much more dangerous to tyrants everywhere. It was hope. And hope, as the galaxy was learning, was a very human thing to share. Ambassador Elena Vasquez looked out the small window of her transport ship as it moved through space toward Station Nexus 7. The massive space station looked like a giant metal flower floating in the darkness, with long arms stretching out in all directions. Each arm held docking bays for ships from different worlds across the galaxy. Elena had been working as Earth's top diplomat for 15 years. She was 53 years old with gray hair that she kept tied back in a neat bun. Her brown eyes showed the wisdom that came from years of dealing with alien species who thought very differently from humans. Today was the most important day of her career. For the past 3 years, Elena had been working on something called the Treaty of 12 Worlds. This treaty would create the first major alliance between humanity and the Galactic Confederation. The Confederation was a group of alien species that had been ruling most of the galaxy for over 2,000 years. They had advanced technology and powerful armies, but they were also very proud and set in their ways. Humans were still new to the galaxy. It had only been 50 years since Earth made first contact with aliens. Most of the older alien species looked down on humans as young and primitive. They thought humans were good for trade and maybe some basic diplomacy, but nothing more important than that. Elena knew this meeting could change everything. If the treaty was signed, humans would finally have a real place in galactic politics. They would be partners with some of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. It was her life's work, and she was so close to making it happen. The transport ship docked at Station Nexus 7 with a soft bump. Elena gathered her papers and straightened her dark blue diplomatic uniform. She had worn this same uniform to hundreds of meetings over the years. The Earth symbol on her shoulder patch looked small compared to the elaborate designs worn by alien diplomats, but she wore it with pride. As Elena walked through the station's corridors, she saw beings from dozens of different worlds. There were the tall, thin Altarians with their silver skin and large black eyes. The Drakmori stomped by on their thick legs, their reptilian faces scarred from countless battles. Small groups of Stellaris floated past, their energy forms barely contained in special suits. But the most important aliens at this meeting were the Zephyrians. They were the leaders of the Galactic Confederation and had been for over 1,000 years. The Zephyrians looked somewhat like humans, but they were taller and thinner. Their skin was pale blue, and they had no hair on their heads. Instead, they had small crystals that grew from their scalps in complex patterns. The Zephyrians believed they were the most advanced species in the galaxy. They had ruled for so long that they thought it was their natural right. The idea that young species, like humans, might become their equals made them very angry. Many Zephyrians saw human expansion into space as a direct threat to their authority. Elena knew some Zephyrians opposed the treaty, but she believed most of them were reasonable beings who could see the benefits of working with humanity. Humans were excellent traders, innovative scientists, and skilled diplomats. They could bring new ideas and energy to the old Confederation. The main assembly hall of Station Nexus 7 was enormous. The ceiling was so high that Elena could barely see it in the dim light. Hundreds of seats were arranged in a circle around a central speaking area. Each section was designed for different alien species, with special atmosphere controls and seating that matched their physical needs. Elena took her place at the human delegation table. There were only 5 humans at the meeting compared to hundreds of aliens. This made Elena feel small but also determined. She represented all of humanity, and she would not let them down. The meeting began with the usual ceremonies and speeches. Different alien species talked about their history, their achievements, and their hopes for the future. Elena listened politely, even though she had heard similar speeches many times before. When it was her turn to speak, Elena walked to the center of the hall. Her footsteps echoed in the huge space. She looked around at all the different alien faces watching her. Some looked curious, others seemed bored, and a few appeared hostile. "Honored delegates," Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's speakers. "Today we have the chance to create something new. For too long, our species have remained separate, each following our own path through the stars. The Treaty of 12 Worlds offers us the opportunity to walk together toward a brighter future." Elena spoke for 20 minutes about the benefits of the treaty. She talked about shared trade routes, joint scientific research, and mutual defense agreements. She explained how humans could contribute to galactic civilization while learning from older, wiser species. Most of the aliens listened respectfully. The Altarians nodded their approval several times. Even some of the proud Drakmori seemed interested in what she had to say. But Elena noticed that the Zephyrian delegates sat perfectly still, their faces showing no emotion at all. After Elena finished speaking, the meeting broke for a meal. This was always Elena's favorite part of diplomatic meetings. Food was one of the few things that all species could share and enjoy together, even if their diets were very different. Elena was talking with an Altarian scientist about Earth's music when she noticed something strange. Several Zephyrians were moving through the crowd in a careful pattern. They were not socializing like everyone else. Instead, they seemed to be taking specific positions around the hall. A cold feeling grew in Elena's stomach. In her 15 years as a diplomat, she had learned to trust her instincts about danger. Something was wrong. Elena started to move toward the exit, but the Zephyrians moved faster. She heard a soft humming sound that she recognized immediately. It was the charging noise made by plasma weapons. "Everyone down!" Elena shouted, but her warning came too late. Bright blue bolts of plasma energy erupted from concealed positions around the hall. The bolts were aimed with deadly precision. Elena felt a burning pain in her chest as the first bolt hit her. She fell to the marble floor, her papers scattering around her dot. More plasma bolts filled the air. Other delegates screamed and ran for cover, but the attack was over in seconds. The Zephyrian shooters disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. Leaving behind chaos and death, Elena lay on the cold floor, feeling her life draining away. She could see her blood spreading across the beautiful white marble, mixing with the scattered pages of the treaty she had worked so hard to create. The irony was bitter. She had come here to build peace, and instead she had found war. Other beings rushed to help her, but Elena knew it was too late. She had been hit in the heart and lungs. Even with the best medical technology in the galaxy, she would not survive. As her vision began to fade, Elena thought about Earth. She thought about her daughter Sarah, who was serving as a captain in the human colonial navy. She thought about her husband David, who had died in a mining accident 10 years earlier. She thought about all the humans who had put their trust in her to secure their future among the stars. Elena Quota's last conscious thought was a prayer that her death would not destroy everything she had worked for. She hoped that wiser minds would find a way to preserve the peace. But Elena did not know her killers very well. The Zephyrians had not just murdered her. They had broadcast the assassination live to media outlets across the galaxy. Every major news network had cameras in the assembly hall. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds watched as Earth's top diplomat was gunned down during a peace conference. The Zephyrians thought this would be a message to humanity and other young species. They wanted to show that the old order would not change. They wanted to demonstrate that they still had the power to destroy anyone who challenged them. What the Zephyrians did not understand was that they had just made the biggest mistake in their species' long history. The news of Elena's assassination reached Earth's capital city of Geneva within hours. The Human Colonial Authority building was a tall tower of glass and steel that rose above Lake Geneva. Inside the building's command center, screens showed news feeds from across the galaxy. Admiral Marcus Chen was reviewing naval reports when his aide burst into his office. Chen was a stern man in his 60s with short gray hair and intelligent dark eyes. He had served in Earth's military for 40 years, rising through the ranks during humanity's expansion into space. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," the aide said, his face pale with shock. Chen watched the assassination footage 3 times without saying a word. His expression did not change, but his aide could see his hands slowly tighten into fists. When the recording ended, Chen sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Chen reached for his secure communicator. He entered a code that had never been used before, a code that would alert every human military commander in the galaxy. "Mobilize," Chen said into the communicator. That single word would change the course of galactic history. Across human space, the mobilization order spread like wildfire. On Earth, military bases that had been quiet for decades suddenly burst into activity. Soldiers who had been on leave were called back to duty. Factories that had been producing consumer goods were converted to military production. On Mars, the massive shipyards began working around the clock. Ships that had been designed for exploration and trade were retrofitted with weapons and armor. New ships began rolling off the production lines at a rate that surprised even the humans themselves. In the asteroid belt, mining crews received new orders. Instead of extracting rare metals for electronics, they began mining iron and uranium for weapons. The huge mining ships were converted into mobile fortresses, their industrial equipment turned into devastating weapons of war. On the outer colonies, millions of humans who had lived peaceful lives as farmers, traders, and scientists suddenly found themselves preparing for war. They had never wanted to fight, but the murder of Ambassador Vasquez had awakened something deep in the human spirit. The galaxy was about to learn something that it had forgotten during 50 years of peaceful human expansion. Humans were the only species that had achieved faster than light travel while still actively fighting wars on their home planet. They were the only species that had developed their advanced technology through centuries of conflict. Other alien species had evolved beyond warfare before reaching the stars. They fought when necessary, but they followed ancient rules and traditions that limited the scope of their conflicts. War for them was a formal affair with established boundaries and acceptable outcomes. Humans were different. Humans had learned to fight total war, where the only acceptable outcome was complete victory. They had learned to turn their entire civilization into a weapon when threatened. They had learned to show no mercy to enemies who showed no mercy to them. The Zephyrians had wanted to send a message by murdering Elena Vasquez. They had succeeded beyond their wildest nightmares. The message they had sent was simple. Humanity was at war, and humanity did not fight by anyone else's rules. As news of the mobilization spread across the galaxy, other species began to watch humanity with new eyes. The peaceful traders and friendly diplomats were revealing their true nature. Humanity had been holding back, showing only their gentle side to galactic civilization. Now the mask was coming off, and what lay beneath would terrify the galaxy. President Sarah Kim stood at the window of her office in the Human Colonial Authority building, looking out at Lake Geneva. The water was calm and peaceful, reflecting the morning sunlight like a mirror. It was hard to believe that such a quiet scene existed on the same planet that was now preparing for the largest war in galactic history. Sarah was 45 years old with short black hair and sharp green eyes. She had been president of the Human Colonial Authority for only 2 years, but she had already proven herself to be a strong leader. Before entering politics, she had served as a trade negotiator, traveling to dozens of alien worlds to establish commercial relationships. Sarah had known Elena Vasquez personally. They had worked together on several trade agreements before Elena became Earth's chief diplomat. The news of Elena's assassination had hit Sarah like a physical blow, but she could not allow her personal grief to cloud her judgment. She had to think about what was best for all of humanity. The secure door to Sarah's office opened, and Admiral Chen entered along with General Patricia Moore, the head of the Human Colonial Marines. General Moore was a tough woman in her 50s, with red hair that was starting to turn gray. She had fought in the Titan Rebellion 15 years earlier, and had earned a reputation as one of humanity's finest military tacticians. "Madam President," Admiral Chen said, "we need to discuss our response options." Sarah turned away from the window and walked to her desk. The desk was made of wood from Earth's forests, a reminder of humanity's home world. On the desk were reports from intelligence services, military assessments, and diplomatic communications from across the galaxy. "What are our assets?" Sarah asked. General Moore opened her tablet and began reading. "We currently have 437 major warships spread across human space. Another 200 ships are in various stages of construction. Our ground forces total approximately 2 million active personnel, with reserves that could expand that number to 8 million within 6 months. Sarah nodded. These numbers seemed impressive, but they were tiny compared to the military might of the Galactic Confederation. The Zephyrians alone had over 3,000 major warships, and they could call on the fleets of a dozen allied species. "What about our industrial capacity?" Sarah asked. Admiral Chen leaned forward. "This is where things get interesting, Madam President. Our official military production is limited by the various arms control treaties we signed with the Confederation. But our civilian industries are massive and largely unregulated." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "Our merchant marine is enormous," Chen continued. "We have over 10,000 civilian ships of various sizes operating throughout the galaxy. Most of them are lightly built compared to warships, but they could be converted for military use. Our mining and construction industries are also far larger than most alien species realize." General Moore added. "The aliens think of us as traders and diplomats because that's what we've shown them. They don't understand that our entire civilization is built on a foundation of industrial warfare capabilities, left over from our pre-space flight period." Sarah understood. Humans had developed faster than light travel while still fighting major wars on Earth. Their technology had advanced through military necessity, not peaceful exploration like most alien species. Even their civilian industries were designed with the potential for military conversion in mind. "What about the political situation?" Sarah asked. Admiral Chen's expression darkened. "The Galactic Confederation is treating this as an isolated incident. They claim the assassination was carried out by rogue elements within the Zephyrian government. They're offering to conduct an investigation and provide compensation to Elena's family." "Compensation," Sarah said, her voice cold with anger. "They think they can pay us off like we're some primitive tribe." "It gets worse," General Moore said. "Our intelligence sources report that several Confederation species are viewing this as a test. They want to see if humanity will accept this treatment and remain in our assigned place in the galactic hierarchy." Sarah sat down in her chair and thought for several minutes. The two military leaders waited patiently. They had worked with Sarah long enough to know that she was not someone who made hasty decisions, especially decisions that could affect the fate of humanity. Finally, Sarah looked up. "What would total war look like?" Admiral Chen and General Moore exchanged glances. They had been hoping she would ask this question, but they were also afraid of it. "Total war means we abandon all treaty limitations on military production," Admiral Chen said. "We convert our entire industrial base to military purposes. We mobilize every human in the galaxy for the war effort. We fight not just to win battles, but to completely destroy our enemy's ability to wage war." General Moore continued. "It means we use every advantage we have, regardless of galactic conventions about warfare. It means we show the galaxy what human military doctrine really looks like when we're not holding back." Sarah stood up and walked to a wall that displayed a map of the galaxy. Human territory was marked in blue, a relatively small cluster of systems compared to the vast territories controlled by the Confederation species. But Sarah knew that size was not everything in warfare. "How long would it take to implement full mobilization?" she asked. 6 months to reach peak production," Admiral Chen replied. "But we could begin showing results within weeks." Sarah made her decision. She walked back to her desk and pressed a button that activated the emergency session protocol for the Human Colonial Council. Within minutes, representatives from every human world would be connected to a secure communication network. The main screen in Sarah's office lit up with dozens of faces. These were the elected representatives of humanity's colonies, the people who spoke for billions of humans scattered across hundreds of worlds. Sarah could see the tension and grief in their faces. They all knew why they had been called together. "Fellow citizens," Sarah began. 6 hours ago, Ambassador Elena Vasquez was murdered while attempting to negotiate a peace treaty with the Galactic Confederation. The assassination was broadcast live across the galaxy as a deliberate insult to humanity. Angry voices filled the communication channel, but Sarah held up her hand for silence. The Galactic Confederation has responded to this murder with silence and empty promises of investigation. They have made it clear that they do not consider the life of a human diplomat to be of any importance. They have shown us exactly what they think of humanity's place in the galaxy. Sarah paused to let her words sink in. Today I am asking you to authorize the withdrawal of humanity from all existing treaties with alien species. I am asking you to recall all diplomatic personnel from alien worlds, and I am asking you to invoke Article 7 of the Human Colonial Charter. A shocked silence filled the channel. Article 7 had been written into the Charter 50 years ago, but it had never been used. Article 7 authorized the complete mobilization of human civilization for total war. Representative Johnson from the Mars colonies was the first to speak. "Madam President, are you asking us to declare war on the entire Galactic Confederation?" "I am asking you to declare that humanity will no longer accept the role of a junior partner in galactic civilization," Sarah replied. "I am asking you to declare that the murder of our diplomats will have consequences. I am asking you to show the galaxy what happens when humanity goes to war without restraint." The vote was not even close. Every single human colony voted to authorize Article 7. In the 50-year history of human space exploration, the colonial representatives had never been so united on any issue. As the communication ended, Sarah felt the weight of history on her shoulders. She had just committed humanity to a path that could lead to either galactic domination or complete destruction. There would be no middle ground. Within hours of the vote, the transformation began. Across human space, civilian authorities took control of all industrial production. Factory owners who had been making household goods received new orders to produce weapons and armor. Shipyards that had been building passenger liners began constructing warships. On Earth itself, the changes were dramatic. The city of Detroit, which had been the center of human automotive production for over a century, became the center of military vehicle production. Factories that had been making cars and trucks began producing tanks and armored personnel carriers. In orbit around Earth, massive space elevators carried a constant stream of raw materials up from the planet's surface. These materials were processed in automated factories that worked around the clock to produce everything from small arms ammunition to the complex electronics needed for spaceship navigation systems. The asteroid belt became humanity's primary source of raw materials for the war effort. Mining ships that had been extracting rare metals for luxury goods began mining iron, uranium, and other materials needed for military production. The asteroids contained enough resources to supply a war effort for decades. On Mars, the famous shipyards of Olympus City expanded at an incredible rate. New construction bays were built in weeks using prefabricated modules. The red planet's low gravity made it ideal for building large spacecraft, and soon the Martian shipyards were producing more military vessels than the rest of the galaxy combined. The outer colonies contributed in their own ways. Europa became a major center for producing military electronics, taking advantage of the moon's low radiation environment. Titan's chemical industries began producing explosives and rocket fuel on a massive scale. Even the tiny research stations on the edge of human space were converted to support the war effort. But the most dramatic changes were in the human military itself. Officers who had spent their careers managing small peacekeeping forces suddenly found themselves in command of vast armies. Soldiers who had trained for police actions and humanitarian missions received new training in total warfare tactics. Admiral Chen established his headquarters on Luna, Earth's moon. From there, he could coordinate the activities of human fleets across the galaxy. The Luna Command Center was expanded from a small administrative facility to a massive military complex that operated 24 hours a day. General Moore set up her headquarters on Mars, where she could oversee the training of new Marine battalions. The red planet's harsh environment was perfect for preparing soldiers for warfare in hostile conditions. Soon, hundreds of thousands of new Marines were graduating from Martian training camps every month. The speed of the transformation amazed even the humans themselves. Within weeks, their military production had increased by 500%. Within months, they were producing more weapons and spacecraft than they had in the previous 50 years combined. But the most important change was not in humanity's industrial capacity, it was in their attitude. For 50 years, humans had been trying to fit in with galactic civilization. They had followed alien rules, accepted alien traditions, and tried to prove that they were civilized and peaceful. The assassination of Elena Vasquez had changed all of that. Humans were no longer interested in proving themselves to alien species. They were no longer willing to accept a subordinate role in galactic politics. They were no longer going to fight by anyone else's rules. The galaxy was about to learn what humans were really capable of when they stopped holding back. The other species had grown comfortable with humanity's reputation as peaceful traders and skilled diplomats. They had forgotten that humans were the only species to develop space travel while still waging wars on their home planet. They were about to be reminded of that fact in the most dramatic way possible. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the HSS Retribution, watching as her ship moved through hyperspace toward the Kepler Junction. The Retribution was one of the new Avenger-class battleships that had been built in the Martian shipyards over the past 6 months. It was sleek and deadly, designed specifically for the kind of warfare that humans excelled at. Lisa was 34 years old with brown hair that she kept tied back in a military regulation bun. She had dark eyes that missed nothing and a calm voice that could be heard clearly even during the chaos of battle. She had been serving in the human colonial navy for 12 years. Working her way up from a junior navigation officer to command of her own ship. Lisa had known Ambassador Vasquez personally. Elena had been a friend of Lisa's mother, and Lisa had met her several times at family gatherings when she was younger. The ambassador's murder had affected Lisa deeply, but she had channeled her grief and anger into determination to make the Zephyrians pay for their crime. The Retribution was leading a human task force of 20 ships towards Zephyrian space. It was the first major human military operation since the mobilization began 6 months earlier. Lisa knew that the entire galaxy would be watching to see how humans fought when they were truly angry. "Captain," said Lieutenant Commander Harrison, the ship's tactical officer, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Chen." Lisa nodded. "Put him through." Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Lisa could see the busy command center of Luna Station, where dozens of officers were coordinating human military operations across the galaxy. "Captain Rodriguez," Chen said, "you are about to engage the enemy for the first time since this war began. Your orders are simple. Demonstrate to the galaxy what unrestricted human warfare looks like. Show them no mercy, but follow the rules of warfare regarding civilian targets." Lisa straightened in her command chair. "Understood, sir. What are my engagement parameters?" "Destroy any military target you encounter," Chen replied. "If they surrender, accept it. If they don't surrender, destroy them completely. The galaxy needs to understand that humanity does not fight by their rules. We fight to win, and we fight until our enemies can no longer threaten us." The transmission ended, and Lisa turned to address her crew. The bridge of the Retribution held 20 officers and technicians, all of them trained in the new combat doctrines that human military academies had developed over the past months. "You all heard the Admiral," Lisa said. "Today we show the galaxy what happens when you murder our diplomats. Today we show them what human warfare really looks like. All stations, prepare for combat." The Kepler Junction was a strategic location where several hyperspace routes met. It was heavily fortified by the Zephyrians, who used it as a major military staging area. Intelligence reports indicated that the Zephyrian Third Fleet was stationed there, consisting of approximately 60 ships of various sizes. As the human task force dropped out of hyperspace, Lisa could see the enemy fleet waiting for them. The Zephyrian ships were beautiful in their own way, with smooth curves and elegant designs that reflected their advanced technology. But Lisa was not impressed by their appearance. She was interested only in their combat capabilities. Enemy. Fleet detected, reported Lieutenant Stevens from the sensor station. 63 ships total. Composition matches our intelligence reports. Lisa nodded. The humans were outnumbered 3-1, but they had advantages that the Zephyrians did not understand. Human ships were built differently from alien vessels. They were designed for the kind of brutal, close-range combat that humans had perfected during centuries of warfare on Earth. Communications, hail the enemy fleet, Lisa ordered. A moment later, the face of a Zephyrian admiral appeared on the screen. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and the crystal formations on his head that marked him as a member of the noble class. His expression showed supreme confidence and barely concealed contempt for the humans. "I am Admiral Zarthek of the Zephyrian Third Fleet," he said in the universal translation language. "You are trespassing in Confederation space. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Lisa smiled coldly. "I am Captain Rodriguez of the Human Colonial Navy. You are harboring the murderers of our diplomat. Surrender now or be destroyed." Admiral Zarthek's expression showed surprise and then amusement. "You dare to threaten the Third Fleet with 20 primitive ships? Your species has forgotten its place in the galaxy, we will remind you." The transmission ended, and Lisa turned to her tactical officer. "Battle stations. All ships attack Formation Alpha. Target their command ships first." The human ships moved into formation with a precision that surprised the watching Zephyrians. Most alien species fought space battles like naval encounters from ancient times, with ships arranged in neat lines firing at long range according to formal rules of engagement. Humans fought differently. Their ships moved in coordinated groups, using advanced computer systems to share targeting data and coordinate their attacks. They had studied the tactical mistakes made by alien species and developed countermeasures for every common strategy. The battle began when the Zephyrian fleet opened fire with their plasma cannons. Bright blue bolts of energy streaked across the darkness of space, striking the human ships' shields and armor. The Zephyrians expected the humans to respond with similar, long-range weapons fire. Instead, the human ships accelerated to maximum speed and charged directly at the enemy fleet. This was something the Zephyrians had never seen before. In their experience, space battles were fought at long range with careful positioning and formal tactics. "All weapons, fire at will," Lisa ordered. The Retribution's main guns opened fire, sending streams of magnetically accelerated projectiles toward the nearest Zephyrian ship. Unlike plasma bolts, these projectiles could not be deflected by energy shields. They punched through armor plating like bullets through paper. Around the Retribution, the other human ships were using their own preferred weapons. Some fired gravity, torpedoes that could crush enemy ships from the inside. Others used quantum disruptors that tore apart the molecular structure of anything they hit. A few ships even deployed nuclear mines that created massive explosions in the vacuum of space. But the most shocking weapon was the human willingness to ram enemy ships when their ammunition ran low. The HSS Determination, after expending all, its missiles accelerated to ramming speed and drove directly into a Zephyrian cruiser. Both ships were destroyed in the collision, but the psychological effect on the enemy was devastating. Admiral Zarthek watched in horror as his elegant fleet was torn apart by the savage human attack. His ships were individually superior to the human vessels, but they had never faced an enemy that fought with such brutal efficiency. The humans ignored all the traditional rules of space warfare and used every possible advantage to destroy their enemies. "All ships retreat to defensive positions," Zarthek ordered, but it was too late. The human ships were moving too fast and hitting too hard. His fleet was being destroyed piece by piece. The battle lasted only 47 minutes. When it was, over 51 Zephyrian ships had been destroyed or crippled. Only 12 managed to escape, and most of those were damaged. The human task force had lost only 3 ships, though several others were badly damaged. Lisa looked at the tactical display showing the wreckage of the enemy fleet floating in space. She felt no satisfaction at the destruction, only grim determination to continue the job that had been started. "Communications, send a message to the escaping ships," Lisa ordered. A moment later, she was speaking directly to Admiral Zarthek, whose command ship was limping away from the battle scene with its engines barely functional. "Admiral," Lisa said, "I want you to deliver a message to your government. Tell them that this is what happens when you murder human diplomats. Tell them that we don't fight by your rules. We fight to win, and we will keep fighting until our enemies can no longer threaten us." Admiral Zarthek's face showed shock and fear. "This is not how civilized species conduct warfare," he said. "There are rules, traditions, honor codes that must be followed." Lisa's expression remained cold. "Ambassador Vasquez was trying to negotiate a peace treaty when your people murdered her. You want to talk about honor? You want to talk about civilized behavior? You forfeited any claim to honor when you killed an unarmed diplomat during a peace conference." The transmission ended, and Lisa turned to her crew. "Damage reports from all ships. Begin recovery operations for our casualties, and send word to Admiral Chen that the Kepler Junction is now under human control." News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. The alien media networks had expected the humans to be easily defeated by the superior Zephyrian fleet. Instead, they found themselves reporting on the complete destruction of one of the Confederation's most powerful military units. The reaction among different alien species varied greatly. The Altarians, who had always maintained friendly relations with humanity, expressed concern about the escalating conflict but refrained from taking sides. The Drakmori, who respected military prowess above all else, began to view humanity with newfound interest and caution. The Stellar Consortium, a group of merchant species, immediately began calculating the economic impact of a prolonged war. They realized that their trade networks would be severely disrupted if the conflict spread, and they started making quiet overtures about possible mediation. But it was the reaction among the smaller, younger species that was most significant. For centuries, these species had accepted their subordinate role in the galactic hierarchy, because they believed the older species were too powerful to challenge. The human victory at Kepler Junction showed them that even the mighty Zephyrians could be defeated. On dozens of worlds, species that had been oppressed by the Confederation began to whisper about the possibility of freedom. They watched the human news broadcasts and saw Captain Rodriguez calmly explaining that humans did not fight by anyone else's rules. They saw the wreckage of the Zephyrian fleet and began to believe that change was possible. The Zephyrian government reacted with shock and outrage. For over 1,000 years, they had been the dominant military power in the galaxy. No one had ever defeated one of their fleets so decisively. The loss of the Third Fleet was not just a military disaster. It was a threat to their entire worldview. Emergency sessions were called in the Zephyrian capital. Military commanders demanded immediate reinforcements to prevent further human advances. Political leaders argued about whether to seek peace or to escalate the conflict. Religious authorities proclaimed that the humans were a threat to the natural order of the universe. But while the Zephyrians argued among themselves, the humans continued their advance. Admiral Chen had not sent just one task force into enemy territory. Dozens of human fleets were moving through space, each one targeting strategic locations throughout the Confederation. The war that had begun with the assassination of a single diplomat was becoming a galactic conflict that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. And the humans were just getting started. Lisa Rodriguez and her crew prepared for their next mission, knowing that they were part of something much larger than a simple military campaign. They were part of humanity's declaration that they would no longer accept a subordinate role in galactic civilization. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about what happened when you underestimated the human capacity for warfare. And this was only the beginning. The Altarian embassy on Station Harmony was one of the most beautiful buildings in the galaxy. Its silver walls seemed to flow like water, and soft blue lights created a peaceful atmosphere that was supposed to encourage diplomatic discussion. Today, however, the embassy was filled with tension as representatives from dozens of alien species gathered for an emergency meeting. Ambassador Veltar of the Altarian Empire was a tall, graceful being with silver skin and large black eyes that reflected wisdom accumulated over 3 centuries of life. She had served as a diplomat for over 100 years and had never seen the galaxy in such chaos. The human war against the Zephyrians had been raging for 8 months, and the conflict was spreading beyond anyone's ability to control it. "The situation is becoming impossible," declared Ambassador Korth of the Drakmori. The reptilian warrior diplomat was pacing back and forth across the embassy's main conference room, his thick tail swishing with agitation. Human fleets have destroyed 17 Zephyrian military installations and captured 4 entire star systems. Our trade routes are being disrupted. Our colonies are demanding protection, and some species are beginning to question the authority of the Confederation itself. Ambassador Veltar nodded sadly. The humans are fighting unlike any species we have encountered before. They do not seem interested in achieving limited objectives or negotiating favorable terms. They appear to be fighting for the complete destruction of Zephyrian military power. The meeting had been called by the Stellar Consortium, a group of merchant species who were suffering massive economic losses due to the war. Their representative, a small blue being named Trader Zix, stood at the center of the room holding a data tablet filled with disturbing statistics. The economic impact is catastrophic, Zix announced in his high-pitched voice. Trade volume has declined by 47% in the affected sectors. Insurance costs for merchant vessels have increased by 300%. Several major shipping companies have declared bankruptcy. If this conflict continues, it will cause a galaxy-wide economic collapse. Around the room, other alien diplomats murmured their agreement. The war between humans and Zephyrians was affecting everyone, even species that had no direct involvement in the conflict. Ambassador Telnock of the Meridian Council raised one of his 4 arms for attention. His species looked like giant praying mantises with purple exoskeletons and compound eyes. Perhaps it is time to consider mediation. Both sides have demonstrated their military capabilities. Surely they can be convinced to negotiate a settlement. Several other diplomats nodded, but Ambassador Korth shook his massive reptilian head. You do not understand human psychology, he said. I have studied their history extensively since this war began. Humans do not fight the way we do. When they go to war, they fight until their enemies surrender unconditionally or are destroyed completely. They have no concept of limited warfare or acceptable losses. Ambassador Veltar consulted her own data tablet. Korth is correct. Our intelligence services have analyzed human military history going back thousands of years. They have fought hundreds of major wars on their home planet, and the pattern is always the same. They continue fighting until their enemies can no longer resist. They call it total war, and it is unlike anything we have seen in galactic civilization. This information troubled the alien diplomats. Most species in the galaxy had evolved beyond primitive warfare before developing space travel. Their conflicts were usually resolved through formal combat between limited numbers of warriors, with clear rules about what was and was not acceptable. The idea of mobilizing an entire civilization for war was foreign to them. What do the humans want? Asked Ambassador Cisara of the Neural Collective. Her species consisted of energy beings who rarely involved themselves in physical conflicts. What would it take to convince them to stop this war? Ambassador Veltar activated a holographic display that showed recent human communications. According to our intelligence sources, Admiral Chen has given the same response to all diplomatic overtures. He demands that the Zephyrians surrender. The individuals responsible for Ambassador Vasquez's assassination for trial by human courts. He also demands that the Zephyrian government formally acknowledge human equality in galactic affairs. Those are reasonable demands, observed Ambassador Colven of the Crystalline Hegemony. The Zephyrians refuse to consider them, replied Ambassador Korth. They claim that surrendering their own citizens to alien justice would be a violation of their sovereignty. They also refuse to acknowledge human equality, because it would undermine their entire political system, which is based on the belief that they are the rightfully dominant species in the galaxy. The room fell silent as the diplomats contemplated this information. They were facing a classic diplomatic deadlock, but one with consequences that could destroy galactic civilization. Ambassador Veltar decided to share the most disturbing intelligence her government had gathered. There is something else you need to know. Our military analysts believe that the humans are not fighting at their full capacity. They estimate that humanity has mobilized less than 30% of their total industrial and military potential for this war. This revelation shocked the alien diplomats. The human military performance had already exceeded everyone's expectations. The idea that they were holding back was terrifying. "How is that possible?" asked Trader Zix. "Our economic projections show that human military production has increased by over 500% since the war began. Humans have a unique industrial system," Ambassador Korth explained. "Most species develop specialized industries for military and civilian purposes. Humans developed their technology during periods of total war, so their civilian industries can be rapidly converted to military production. Their merchant ships can become warships. Their mining equipment can become weapons. Their entire civilization is designed to support warfare when necessary." Ambassador Veltar added, "Our intelligence also suggests that humans have been developing military technologies in secret for decades. They have weapons and ships that we have never seen before. The vessels they used to defeat the Zephyrian Third Fleet were completely unknown to our databases." While the alien diplomats discussed the growing crisis, the war itself was expanding beyond anyone's ability to control it. Human fleets were advancing through Zephyrian space like an unstoppable tide, destroying military installations and capturing strategic locations. The siege of Arcturus Station was typical of human military operations during this period. Arcturus was a massive space station that served as the headquarters for the Zephyrian Fourth Fleet. It was heavily fortified and defended by over 200 ships, making it one of the strongest military positions in the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Chen, the younger sister of Admiral Marcus Chen, commanded the human forces attacking Arcturus. She had developed a reputation as one of humanity's most innovative military commanders, specializing in siege warfare and planetary assault operations. Sarah's fleet consisted of only 60 ships, but they included several of the new Devastator-class battleships that had been built specifically for attacking fortified positions. These massive vessels carried weapons that could crack open space stations like eggs. "Begin the bombardment," Sarah ordered from the bridge of her flagship, the HSS Nemesis. The human ships opened fire with weapons that the defenders had never seen before. Gravity cannons created localized gravitational fields that crushed sections of the station's hull. Quantum torpedoes phased through shield generators and exploded inside the station's vital systems. Plasma lances cut through armor plating like hot knives through butter. But the most devastating weapons were the singularity bombs. These devices created tiny black holes that consumed everything in their immediate vicinity before collapsing safely. 3 direct hits from singularity bombs left massive holes in Arcturus Station's structure. The battle lasted 12 hours. When it was over, Arcturus Station was a broken wreck drifting in space. The Zephyrian Fourth Fleet had been completely destroyed, and over 50,000 Zephyrian military personnel were dead or captured. Admiral Sarah Chen broadcast a message to the surviving Zephyrian forces in the system. "This is what happens when you murder our diplomats. Surrender now or share the fate of Arcturus Station." The psychological impact of the siege was enormous. Arcturus Station had been considered one of the most secure military installations in the galaxy. Its destruction demonstrated that nowhere in Zephyrian space was safe from human attack. More importantly, the humans had accomplished the siege with minimal casualties. Only 4 human ships had been destroyed, and fewer than 2,000 human personnel had been killed. The efficiency of their victory was almost as frightening as the destruction they had caused. News of the siege reached Earth within hours, where President Kim was meeting with her military advisors. The war had been going on for 8 months, and the results had exceeded everyone's expectations. Human forces had won every major engagement, captured dozens of star systems, and destroyed over half of the Zephyrian military fleet. "The aliens are beginning to panic," reported Director Thompson of Human Intelligence Services. "Our sources indicate that several species are considering breaking their alliances with the Zephyrians. The Meridian Council has withdrawn its fleet from the border regions. The crystalline hegemony is refusing to provide material support to the Zephyrian war effort." President Kim nodded with satisfaction. "What about the Zephyrians themselves?" "They're divided," Thompson replied. "The military faction wants to continue fighting, but they're running out of ships and personnel. The political faction wants to negotiate, but they can't accept our terms without destroying their entire government structure. The religious faction believes this is some kind of cosmic test that they must endure. General Moore, who had been listening to the briefing, spoke up. Madam President, I believe we're approaching the end of the conventional phase of this war. The Zephyrians can't match our military production or tactical capabilities, but they may resort to desperate measures if we push them too far. President, Kim understood the warning. Desperate enemies were dangerous enemies, especially when they possessed advanced technology and powerful weapons. What do you recommend, General? We need to give them a way to surrender without losing face, Moore replied. If we back them into a corner with no way out, they might do something catastrophic. Species fighting for their survival are capable of anything. President Kim considered this advice. The war had been successful beyond humanity's wildest dreams, but success brought its own dangers. The galaxy was watching to see what humans would do with their newfound power. The wrong decision could turn potential allies into enemies and create new conflicts that would be even more destructive than the current war. Outside the president's window, Lake Geneva reflected the afternoon sunlight. It was the same peaceful scene that had greeted her 8 months earlier, when she had authorized the mobilization of human civilization for total war. But everything had changed since then. Humanity was no longer a junior partner in galactic civilization. They had proven themselves to be one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. The question now was what they would do with that power. The aliens were watching, waiting to see whether humanity would be a force for justice or just another conquering empire. The decisions made in the coming weeks would determine the fate of galactic civilization for centuries to come. The massive human fleet hung in space around Zephyr Prime like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. Over 300 human warships surrounded the Zephyrian homeworld, the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. The flagship of this armada was the HSS Retribution, now commanded by Admiral Lisa Rodriguez, who had been promoted after her victories in the early stages of the war. Admiral Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the Retribution, looking down at the blue and green world that had been the center of galactic civilization for over 1,000 years. Zephyr Prime was beautiful, with elegant cities that seemed to grow naturally from the landscape and orbital platforms that gleamed like jewels in the sunlight. It was hard to believe that this peaceful-looking world had been the source of so much arrogance and cruelty. The war had lasted exactly 1 year, 3 months and 17 days. In that time, human forces had destroyed or captured over 80% of the Zephyrian military fleet, occupied 37 star systems, and brought the galactic economy to the brink of collapse. The Zephyrians had lost over 2 million military personnel, and countless civilians in the systems that had been evacuated during the human advance. But Chen took no pleasure in the destruction. He was tired of war, tired of making decisions that resulted in death and suffering across the galaxy. The assassination of Elena Vasquez had started this conflict, but it had grown far beyond simple revenge. Humanity had proven its point many times over. Now it was time to end the fighting and build something better from the ashes. Admiral, said Captain Rodriguez, approaching from the bridge. We're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian government. They're requesting permission to discuss surrender terms. Chen nodded. Put them through in my ready room. And Rodriguez, have representatives from the other alien species standing by. I want them to witness whatever happens next. A few minutes later, Chen was sitting across a conference table from High Chancellor Zarethis of the Zephyrian Empire. The Zephyrian leader looked older than his species normally aged, with stress lines around his large eyes and crystal formations on his head that had lost their usual lustrous shine. The weight of his civilization's defeat was visible in every aspect of his appearance. Admiral Chen, Zarethis said in the universal translation language, I have come to discuss the terms of our surrender. Chen studied the alien leader for a moment before responding. High Chancellor, before we discuss terms, I need to know if you understand why this war happened. Do you understand what your people did wrong? Zarethis shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Your species has demonstrated superior military capabilities. We acknowledge your strength and are prepared to accept the consequences of our defeat. Chen shook his head. That's not what I asked. This war didn't happen because of military capabilities. It happened because your people murdered an unarmed diplomat who was trying to negotiate a peace treaty. It happened because you thought you could intimidate humanity into accepting a subordinate role in galactic civilization. The Zephyrian leader was silent for several minutes. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. We believed that we were the rightful rulers of the galaxy. Our species had held that position for over 1,000 years. The idea that younger species like yours might become our equals was difficult to accept. Ambassador Vasquez wasn't trying to become your equal, Chen replied. She was trying to create a partnership that would benefit everyone. Your people killed her because they couldn't stand the thought of sharing power with anyone else. Zarathus looked down at the table. We were wrong. The price of our pride has been the near destruction of our civilization. We beg for mercy. Chen leaned back in his chair and activated a holographic display showing the current military situation. Human fleets controlled most of former Zephyrian space, while the remnants of the Zephyrian fleet were scattered and demoralized. High Chancellor, you need to understand something about human psychology, Chen said. We don't fight wars to conquer other species or to build empires. We fight wars to solve problems. The problem in this case was that your government thought it could murder our diplomats without consequences. That problem needs to be solved permanently. Zarathus raised his head hopefully. What would it take to solve this problem? Chen had been thinking about this moment for months. President Kim had given him broad authority to negotiate surrender terms, but she had been clear about humanity's core requirements. First, Chen said, the individuals responsible for Ambassador Vasquez's assassination must be surrendered to human authorities for trial. This includes not just the shooters but the officials who planned and authorized the attack. The Zephyrian leader nodded reluctantly. That can be arranged. Second, the Zephyrian government must formally acknowledge the equality of all species in galactic affairs. The age of Zephyrian dominance is over. From now on, all species will have an equal voice in galactic governance. This demand was more difficult for Zarathus to accept. Such an acknowledgement would require fundamental changes to our entire political system. Yes, it would, Chen agreed. Your political system is based on the belief that your species is naturally superior to all others. That belief is what led to this war. It has to change. Zarathus was quiet for a long time, considering the implications. Finally, he nodded his agreement. Third, Chen continued, all species that were oppressed or exploited by the Zephyrian Empire will receive full independence and compensation for past injustices. This demand would be expensive for the Zephyrians, but Zarathus understood that he had no choice but to accept it. And finally, Chen said, the Zephyrian military will be limited to defensive forces only. You will not be allowed to maintain the massive fleets that you use to dominate other species. When Chen finished speaking, Zarathus sat in silence for several minutes. These terms would fundamentally change Zephyrian civilization, stripping away the power and prestige that his species had enjoyed for over a millennium, but the alternative was complete destruction. I accept these terms, Zarathus said finally. When will you begin the occupation of our remaining worlds? Chen smiled for the first time in months. High Chancellor, I think you still don't understand how humans think about war. We're not interested in occupying your worlds. We're not interested in ruling your people. We just want to make sure that you never again think you can murder our diplomats without consequences. The surrender ceremony was held on Station Nexus 7, in the same assembly hall where Ambassador Elena Vasquez had been murdered 13 months earlier. Representatives from dozens of alien species attended, along with media outlets from across the galaxy. The ceremony was broadcast live to billions of beings on thousands of worlds. President Kim led the human delegation, wearing the same dark blue uniform that Elena had worn on the day she died. On the podium beside her was a holographic image of the murdered ambassador, a reminder of why this war had been necessary. High Chancellor Zarathus signed the surrender documents with shaking hands. formally ending the Zephyrian Empire and establishing a new galactic order based on equality among species, rather than domination, by the strong over the weak. When the ceremony was complete, President Kim addressed the assembled representatives. "Today marks the end of a tragic chapter in galactic history," she said. "Ambassador Elena Vasquez came to this hall to build peace between our species. She was murdered because some beings could not accept the idea that all species deserve to be treated with respect and dignity." Kim paused and looked around the hall, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of different worlds. The war that followed was not about revenge, though many of you may have thought it was. It was about establishing a principle that must never again be violated. Diplomatic personnel are sacred, and their murder will have consequences that no civilization can survive. Kim gestured toward the human military officers standing around the hall. "You have seen what happens when humanity goes to war without restraint. We prefer peace. It's more profitable and less wasteful. But never mistake our preference for peace as weakness. Never assume that you can intimidate us or treat us as subordinates. And never ever think that you can murder our diplomats without facing the full wrath of human civilization." The hall was completely silent as Kim's words were translated into dozens of alien languages. "Today we establish a new galactic confederation based on equality, respect, and mutual cooperation. All species will have an equal voice in galactic governance. All species will be protected from domination by others. And all species will be held accountable for their actions." Kim walked over to the holographic image of Elena Vasquez and placed her hand on the memorial plaque that had been installed in the ambassador's honor. "Elena, your dream of galactic peace has finally been achieved, just not in the way you had hoped. Your sacrifice was not in vain. The galaxy will remember your name and the principles you died for." As the ceremony ended and the representatives began to leave, Admiral Chen approached President Kim. "Madam President, what happens now? Our fleets control half the galaxy. Our industrial capacity is still operating at wartime levels, and every alien species is afraid of us. How do we transition from war to peace?" Kim looked around the assembly hall, thinking about all the changes that would need to be made. "We do what humans have always done after winning a war, Marcus. We help our former enemies rebuild, we establish new institutions to prevent future conflicts, and we prove that our victory was worth the cost." Chen nodded, understanding the enormous challenge ahead. Winning the war had been the easy part. Building a lasting peace would be much more difficult. Over the following months, human administrators worked with alien governments to establish the new galactic order. War crimes trials were held for the Zephyrians responsible for Elena's assassination. Reparations were paid to species that had been oppressed by the old empire. New institutions were created to prevent future conflicts. The transformation was not easy. Many Zephyrians struggled to accept their new status as equals rather than rulers. Some alien species were suspicious of human motives, wondering if humanity would become the new dominant power in the galaxy. A few radical groups on various worlds tried to restart conflicts, but they were quickly suppressed by the new galactic peacekeeping forces. But slowly, carefully, a new kind of galactic civilization began to emerge. Trade resumed on a more equitable basis. Scientific cooperation flourished as species shared knowledge freely. Cultural exchange programs allowed different civilizations to learn from each other. And in the center of it all was the memorial to Ambassador Elena Vasquez, a reminder that peace was possible, but only when all species were willing to treat each other with respect and dignity. The galaxy had learned to fear human military power, but over time they would learn to respect human commitment to justice and equality. The war that began with one diplomat's murder had ended with the birth of a new and better galactic civilization. Elena Vasquez had not lived to see her dream fulfilled, but her sacrifice had made it possible. The galaxy would never forget the price of peace, or the species that had been willing to pay it.